Daniel Hayes sat in the waiting chamber of the United Terran Embassy, his hands folded on his knees, trying to calm the restlessness in his chest. He had never been inside this part of the building before. Usually the embassy was busy with official visitors, trade partners, or politicians, but today felt different. The halls were quiet, the guards more serious than usual, and the air heavy with importance. He had volunteered for a program he barely understood. Human Comfort Initiative, the paper had called it. They told him only a few details. It was a role of support, not combat, not technical work, but personal assistance. Emotional presence, the form said. Daniel signed up because he had little tying him down. No family nearby, no demanding job, no one waiting for him at home. He thought maybe, just maybe, he could be useful. Now he waited to be called in, wondering if he had made a mistake. The door opened with a soft hiss. An aide in silver-blue uniform motioned him inside. "Mr. Hayes, the counselor will see you now." Daniel stood, smoothed his plain jacket, and walked into the chamber. Inside sat a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. She was tall, her skin faintly silver as if touched by moonlight. Her hair was dark, braided with tiny glowing threads that shimmered softly. Her eyes, large, reflective, like calm pools of water, lifted to meet his. She wore ceremonial garments, flowing and dignified, but her posture was not proud. She seemed tired. The aide introduced her with respect. "This is Diplomat Solari of the Arishen Concord." Solari inclined her head slightly. "And this is the human you recommend?" Her voice was low, carrying a gentle vibration like music spoken through air. Daniel swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Daniel Hayes." The aide left them together. The door shut, leaving Daniel in the silence of the room. Solari studied him, her gaze steady but not unkind. Finally, she spoke. "You understand the role you are asked to fill?" Daniel hesitated. "Not fully, if I'm honest. They said I'm here to help you, to keep you company." Solari's eyelids lowered in thought. She spoke slowly, as if choosing words carefully. "My species. We are not made to sleep in solitude. Sleep for us is not only rest. It is when our bodies repair, when our minds weave memory into strength. Alone, the process becomes unstable. The body resists rest. Illness follows. Madness can follow too." Her voice trembled slightly at that last word, though her face stayed calm. Daniel nodded slowly. "So you need someone with you when you sleep?" "Yes." Her gaze did not waver. "Back on my world, it is natural. Families, companions, or even strangers will share the chamber of rest. Here I am alone. The duty of diplomat requires distance. I asked for aid and they assigned you." Daniel shifted, unsure. He had imagined translation work, errands, maybe guarding someone. But this, sharing the private hours of sleep, felt far more personal. "I don't want to offend," he said carefully, "but why me? I mean, I'm no one special." Solari tilted her head, studying him again. "Because you were willing." Few humans agreed when they learned the task. They called it strange, uncomfortable, even shameful, but you did not turn away. Her words struck him harder than he expected. Daniel felt his face warm. "I just thought, if it helps, why not?" Solari looked at him for a long moment, then gave the smallest nod. "Then tonight we begin." That evening, Daniel followed her escort through winding embassy halls to her private quarters. The rooms were dimly lit with soft violet lamps. The air filled with a faint floral scent, almost like lavender but deeper. The bedchamber was large but simple. Wide resting couch at the center, smooth walls, no clutter. Daniel paused at the doorway, uncertain. "Do you want me in here or nearby?" Solari stood at the bedside, hands folded. The presence must be near. The mind senses company best when sound, breath, and warmth are within reach. Daniel nodded, moving slowly. He sat at the edge of the couch, awkward as ever. "I've never done this before," he admitted. Solari tilted her head slightly, her braids shifting. "Nor have I with a human." There was silence. Then she lay down gracefully, resting her head on a long cushion. Her eyes closed, but her breathing was shallow, uneven. Daniel leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He felt stiff, out of place. He tried to keep still, listening to her. After a while, he said softly, "Do you want me to talk? Or stay quiet?" Solari's eyes opened halfway, glowing faintly in the dim light. Quiet for now, so he stayed quiet. Minutes turned to an hour. Daniel listened to the rhythm of her breath, the faint hum of embassy systems. He wondered about her home, about the family she had left behind, about why one diplomat carried such loneliness. At last, Solari's breathing steadied. Her face relaxed, her body no longer tense. She had fallen asleep. Daniel let out a slow sigh, almost relieved. He adjusted his position, careful not to disturb her. Strange, he thought, how simply being here could matter so much. He had never been needed like this before. The next morning, Solari rose early, already composed, as though the night had not left her vulnerable at all. But Daniel noticed a difference. Her eyes no longer looked clouded with exhaustion. "You slept," he said quietly, almost surprised. Solari paused, then inclined her head. "Yes, it was the first unbroken rest I've had in many weeks." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's good. Means I didn't mess it up." Her lips curved just slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "You did not." Your presence was steady. "You did not leave," Daniel blinked. "Leave? Why would I leave?" "Because humans often fear closeness when it has no clear purpose." Her gaze softened. "But you remained. That is why this may work." Daniel didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, he felt like someone had looked straight through him and still found value. Solari lifted a hand in quiet thanks. "We will continue then. Until my mission ends, you will be my night companion." Daniel nodded firmly. "I'll do my best." That day, Daniel walked the city streets outside the embassy, thinking about what had just begun. The world around him bustled with noise, cars, and chatter. People hurried with their own lives, unaware that a human had been asked to help an alien sleep. It seemed small, almost silly compared to the grand diplomacy of planets. Yet it was also deeply human, being there when someone could not face the night alone. Daniel realized he had entered something greater than himself, and for Solari, so far from home, so bound by duty, perhaps this companionship was the only bridge she had left. The assignment had begun, not with words of politics, but with the quiet breath of rest. Daniel Hayes returned to the embassy at dusk, the sky outside painted in soft streaks of gold and violet. The busy city noises seemed distant as he entered through the guarded gates. He still wasn't used to the thought that a foreign diplomat from another world depended on him, not for translation, not for security, but for something as simple and as heavy as sleep. His steps echoed lightly as he followed the now familiar hallway to Solari's quarters. The first night had gone better than expected. She had actually rested. He had simply stayed by her side, silent, steady, present. But tonight the weight of the task pressed more heavily on his mind. He wondered, was it really so easy? Could a stranger truly help someone find peace just by being near? Or would Solari begin to find his presence distracting, maybe even intrusive? The chamber door slid open. Solari stood waiting, tall and graceful, her silver-toned skin faintly illuminated by the violet lamps. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, deep and reflective, carried a hint of weariness. "You returned," she said softly. Daniel offered a small smile. "I said I would." She inclined her head, then gestured toward the resting couch. "Come. The night asks for stillness." The room was quiet, the silence thick as they settled into place. Solari lay down on the wide couch, her braid resting over her shoulder. Daniel sat near the edge again, feeling awkward but trying not to show it. Minutes passed. Solari closed her eyes, her breathing steady at first, then uneven. Daniel could sense tension in her body, as if she fought against her own need for rest. "Is something wrong?" Daniel asked carefully, her eyes open slightly. The second night is always more difficult. The body expects, but the mind resists. Vulnerability is not a habit. It is a barrier to be crossed again and again. Daniel frowned. "Do you want me to talk? Maybe it'll help." She considered, then gave a slight nod, so Daniel spoke. At first, he wasn't sure what to say. He chose simple things. The city looked different at sunset today. The clouds turned bright orange, almost like fire. Back home, I used to sit on the porch and watch the sky change colors. It made the day feel complete somehow. Solari listened, her gaze on the ceiling, her breathing slow but uneven. Daniel continued, telling her about small pieces of his life. His favorite walk by the river, how he once kept a stray dog for a week, how his grandmother used to hum old lullabies when he was little. The words were not important. It was the warmth in them that mattered. At last, Solari's eyes closed again. "Your voice is different from ours," she murmured. Less resonant, yet steady. "It does not push. It carries," Daniel chuckled softly. "Never thought my voice was good for anything." Do not dismiss it, she whispered. Even sound has weight in the silence of night. Her breathing slowed. Her body eased. Daniel leaned back, relieved. But the calm did not last. Hours later, Daniel stirred awake from a light doze. Solari shifted restlessly, her hands trembling faintly. A low hum escaped her throat, not quite words, more like distress. Daniel leaned closer.
Solari, are you all right?
Her eyes flickered open, glassy and distant. The silence. It stretches too long. On my world, even in rest, we hear others. Their breathing, their heartbeats, the small rustle of bodies nearby. Here there is only void. Daniel's chest tightened. He realized how deep her loneliness truly was. Even with him beside her, the emptiness still pressed against her mind. He spoke quickly, gently. You're not alone. I'm here. You hear me, right? My breathing, my voice. Focus on that. Solari's lips parted, but no words came. Daniel thought fast. He remembered his grandmother's lullabies, the simple tunes meant to calm a child's restless night. He began humming low and steady. The melody was plain, nothing special, but it filled the silence with something alive. Solari's body stilled. Her eyes closed again, this time more peacefully. The tension in her shoulders eased. Slowly, her breathing found rhythm again. Daniel kept humming until her rest seemed deep and safe. Only then did he let himself relax. Morning came softly, light spilling into the chamber through narrow windows. Daniel rubbed his eyes, stiff from sitting all night. Solari rose gracefully, but her gaze lingered on him longer than before. You sang? She said. Daniel blinked. Yeah, well, hummed really. Did it help? She nodded slowly. The silence did not feel so heavy. It carried me into rest. Daniel gave a small shrug, trying to play it off. I guess I've still got my grandma to thank for that. Solari tilted her head. Your grandmother gave you songs and you gave one to me. That is unusual. My people would not share rest songs with those outside their bond. But you gave it freely. Daniel looked down, a bit embarrassed. I didn't think of it that way. I just wanted to help. Her eyes softened. That is the difference between duty and care. Later that day, Daniel wandered the embassy gardens while Solari attended official meetings. The gardens were quiet, filled with flowers, both earthly and alien. He thought about her words. Duty and care. He realized that while he had started this assignment because he had nothing better to do, it was slowly becoming something else. Solari didn't just need a warm body nearby. She needed connection, the simple proof that she wasn't alone in this strange world. And maybe he needed that too. That evening, when Daniel returned for the third night, Solari greeted him differently. Not just with calm formality, but with a small gesture of welcome. Her hand pressed briefly over her chest, a sign of respect among her people. You returned again, she said softly. Of course, Daniel answered. I said I would. This time, as they settled in the chamber, the silence no longer felt as heavy. Solari rested with her braid unbound, her posture more at ease. Daniel sat closer, not awkward, but steady. When she struggled to find rest again, he didn't wait for her to ask. He began humming softly, letting the sound fill the room. Solari whispered, half dreaming. You bring warmth into the stillness, and Daniel, for the first time, realized that this assignment was no small task. It was something fragile, something precious. He wasn't just helping an alien diplomat sleep. He was becoming her bridge to peace in a world that otherwise gave her only isolation. The night stretched on, but neither of them felt entirely alone anymore. And though Daniel didn't know what the future would bring, he sensed that their fragile bond had just begun to take shape, woven quietly in the silence of shared nights. The third week of Daniel's assignment began with a kind of rhythm. Every evening he returned to the embassy, and every night he sat close to Solari while she rested. At first their companionship had been filled with silence, then came his humming, his quiet stories, and her gradual trust. Now something new was forming, a fragile thread of connection woven across two worlds. Still, Daniel often wondered what Solari thought of it all. Did she see him as just a tool? A body filling an empty space beside her? Or did she sense what he had begun to feel? That the nights together meant more than just duty. One night, as Daniel entered her quarters, Solari was already seated by the window. The city lights glowed faintly below, but her gaze was far beyond them, fixed on the dark sky. You look thoughtful. Daniel said carefully. She turned, her silver-toned face touched by lamplight. I was remembering my home. On Arishan, the night sky is full of drifting lanterns. We send them upward each evening, carrying our dreams with them. When I look at your sky, I search for them, but there is only emptiness. Daniel sat down across from her. Sounds beautiful. We don't do lanterns back home, but sometimes we watch shooting stars. People make wishes when they see one. Wishes. Her head tilted with curiosity. Yeah. We close our eyes, think of something we hope for, and believe the falling star will carry it. Solari was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked softly, And did your wishes ever come true? Daniel gave a small wry smile. Not really. But I think the point isn't the result, it's the hope. That tiny spark of believing something good might happen. Solari's eyes reflected the lamplight, thoughtful and soft. Hope, she whispered. On my world, we do not name it so simply. But perhaps it is the same. That night, when they lay in the resting chamber, Solari spoke before closing her eyes. Will you tell me more stories of your home? I would like to hear what shaped you. Daniel nodded. Sure, but only if you tell me something about yours too. Deal? Her lips curved slightly, the faintest trace of a smile. Deal. So Daniel began with small things. How he once built a treehouse with his brother. How he used to ride his bike along the riverside until the sun dipped low. How his mother's cooking filled their small kitchen with warmth. Solari listened with quiet interest, asking gentle questions. Then slowly she shared her own fragments. She told him of the crystal fields of her world, where children would run and their laughter echoed like music. She described the ceremonial nights when whole families rested together in great halls, the sound of many breaths weaving into one rhythm. She even spoke of her sister left behind, whose presence had always been her comfort. For the first time, Daniel felt the distance between their worlds shrinking. The more she spoke, the more human she seemed, not human in body, but in heart. As the days turned into nights, a change came. Solari began to dream again. It happened on the 5th night of that week. Daniel had been humming quietly, watching her chest rise and fall, when he noticed something different. Her face softened in sleep. Her lips moved faintly as though whispering. He leaned closer, listening. Her voice was faint, but he caught words in her language, foreign, musical, yet carrying warmth. She was dreaming. When she awoke in the morning, Daniel asked gently, Did you dream? Solari paused, her expression unreadable at first. Then she nodded. Yes, for the first time since I came to this world. I walked the crystal fields. I saw the lanterns rise, Daniel smiled. That's good. Means you're healing, right? She regarded him carefully. Dreams do not come without safety. My mind allowed it because you were near. You held away the silence. The words struck Daniel deeply. He hadn't realized how important his presence had become, not just for her rest, but for her very soul. Another night, Daniel decided to share something more personal. As they sat before sleep, he said quietly, You know, I haven't dreamed much in a long time either. Not since my dad passed away. After that, nights just felt empty. I'd sleep, sure, but nothing came. Just blank space. Solari turned her gaze to him, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. Loss steals dreams. It steals the courage to let go of wakefulness. Your silence was not only mine, Daniel. He blinked, surprised by her insight. She reached out her hand slightly, not touching him, but letting it rest on the space between them. Then perhaps we both must learn again. How to dream, how to trust the night. Daniel's chest tightened, but in a strangely comforting way. He gave a small nod. Yeah, maybe we can. As the week ended, their bond deepened. Their conversations before rest grew longer. They compared the foods of their worlds, laughing gently at how strange each seemed to the other. Daniel described the bitterness of coffee. Solari wrinkled her nose, saying it sounded like drinking soil. Solari described the sweet nectar of her people's night fruit, and Daniel joked that humans would probably turn it into candy. But it wasn't the laughter that stayed with him most. It was the way she looked at him sometimes, as though seeing not just a companion assigned by duty, but a person she could lean on, and for Daniel, who had spent so much of his life drifting unnoticed, that meant more than he could explain. One night, Solari asked a question that surprised him. Daniel, if you could send a lantern into the sky carrying one dream, what would it be? He thought for a long time, staring at the dim ceiling. Honestly, I'd send a lantern asking to belong somewhere, to not feel like I'm just passing through life. Solari studied him in silence, her expression softening. Then she said quietly, "Perhaps you already carry that lantern, and perhaps it has found a place to rest." Daniel met her gaze, and for a moment the world seemed to still. The next morning, as Daniel left the embassy, he realized something important. This was no longer just about helping an alien diplomat survive sleepless nights. It was about connection, about two souls finding comfort in each other's presence. He had begun this assignment out of duty. But now, as Solari's dreams returned and his own heart found warmth again, he understood. This bond was becoming more than an arrangement. It was the fragile beginning of trust, of shared dreams, of something that reached beyond stars and species. And though Daniel did not yet know what challenges would come, he sensed that their nights together were shaping something powerful. For in the silence of sleep, they had found not only rest but the courage to dream again, together. The embassy was no longer quiet. Daniel noticed it the moment he stepped through the guarded gates that evening. Voices carried sharply in the halls, footsteps echoed with urgency, and aides hurried past with tense expressions. Something had shifted. When he reached Solari's chambers, 2 guards stood outside, their posture more rigid than usual. One of them gave Daniel a sharp look before letting him enter. Inside, Solari sat at her desk, her ceremonial robe folded loosely around her shoulders. The glow of the lamps painted her silver-toned skin in pale light. She did not look up when Daniel stepped closer. Papers, holographic tablets, and messages were scattered across the desk. "Rough day?" Daniel asked carefully. Her voice, when it came, was calm but strained. "Negotiations are collapsing. A rival delegation accuses my people of deception. The humans who once listened now turn doubtful. Every word I speak feels like sand falling through fingers." Daniel shifted uneasily. "That sounds bad." "It is worse than bad." She lifted her gaze at last, her eyes shimmering with exhaustion. "If trust breaks fully, the agreement between our worlds will fail. Years of preparation will crumble. My presence here will become meaningless." Daniel hesitated, then sat down across from her. "Meaningless? No, you've worked too hard for that." Her hands trembled faintly as she pressed them against the desk. "I am the only voice of my people here. If I fail, it is not only me who is judged, it is all of Arishen. They will call us liars. They will close the door to friendship." Her words carried a heavy weight, one Daniel could barely imagine. He wanted to say something comforting, but no words seemed enough. That night, when they entered the resting chamber, the atmosphere was different. The silence that had once carried peace now felt heavy with tension. Solari lay down, but her body stayed rigid, her breath shallow. Daniel sat beside her, uncertain. "Want me to talk? Or hum again?" She shook her head. "No, the noise inside me is louder than anything outside." Hours passed. She shifted constantly, unable to sink into rest. At one point, Daniel noticed tears glistening at the corner of her eyes, though she quickly turned away. He leaned forward, his voice low. "Solari, you don't have to carry this all by yourself," her voice cracked. "I do. That is my duty." "Duty doesn't mean you can't lean on someone," he said gently. "You've been helping your people for so long. Let someone help you, even if it's just through the night." For a long time, she did not respond. Then finally she whispered, "How can you be so steady when the ground crumbles beneath me?" Daniel thought about it, then answered honestly, "Because I've had my ground crumble before, and I know how much it means when someone stays by your side." Solari's gaze met his. Her eyes glistened, vulnerable yet searching. "Then, stay." "I'm not going anywhere," Daniel said firmly. The following days grew harder. Every time Daniel arrived at the embassy, the air seemed heavier, the whispers sharper. He overheard fragments of conversation, words like betrayal, collapse, withdrawal. Solari spoke little during the day, saving her strength for the endless meetings. But at night she returned to him hollow-eyed, her composure cracking. She stopped dreaming again. Instead, she lay restless, her breath uneven, sometimes whispering fragments of her language in her sleep. Daniel began speaking more often through the nights. He told her stories from Earth, about people who failed but kept trying, about explorers who lost their way but found new paths. He wasn't sure if she understood the deeper meaning, but he hoped the warmth in his voice carried through. One night, When she could not rest at all, he finally asked, "What happens if the talks fail completely?" She was silent for a long time before answering. "It means I return home in shame. It means my people lose a chance at peace. And it means humanity will never know us as friends, only as strangers kept at distance." Daniel clenched his fists. "That's not fair. You're giving everything you have." "Fairness is not what decides history," Solari said quietly. Her words pierced him, but they also sparked something inside. He realized that while he could not influence politics, he could still do something important. He could keep her steady enough to face the storm. On the 7th night of the crisis, Solari broke down. She entered the chamber late, her ceremonial robe hanging loose, her braid undone. She sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. Daniel froze at first, then moved closer. "Solari?" he asked softly. Her shoulders shook. "I spoke all day, and still they did not listen. My words twist in their ears. I am losing them, Daniel." He hesitated only a moment before placing a steady hand on her arm. "You're not losing everything. You still have me here." Her breath hitched. She lowered her hands, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Why do you stay?" "You owe me nothing. You are not bound by my mission." Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. "Because you're not just a diplomat. You're a person, and no one should have to face the night alone." For the first time, Solari let herself lean toward him, her forehead resting briefly against his shoulder. Her body trembled, not with weakness but with the release of everything she had been holding inside. Daniel stayed still, steady, letting her know without words that she was safe. That night, when she finally lay down, Daniel didn't sit stiffly apart as before. He stretched out beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough for her to feel his presence. He began humming again, softer than ever, letting the sound flow like a gentle river. Slowly, her breathing eased. For the first time in many nights, she sank into sleep, and when dawn arrived, she opened her eyes with surprise. "I dreamed again," she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. "Good dream?" "Yes, I stood on my world's crystal fields, and I was not alone. There was another presence beside me. It was warm." Daniel didn't answer right away. He just gave her a steady look, and she seemed to understand without needing words. The crisis was not over. The meetings continued, and the accusations grew sharper. But something in Solari had shifted. She was tired, yes, but she no longer looked hollow. Her voice in the council chambers carried a quiet strength. At night, Daniel noticed she still struggled, but now she also leaned on him. Their conversations before rest grew deeper. She spoke of her fears openly, something she had never done before. Daniel listened, offering no solutions, only presence. One evening, she said softly, "Do you know what you have given me, Daniel Hayes? Not only rest, not only dreams. You have given me the courage to keep standing." Daniel looked at her, his chest tight. "And you've given me purpose. I didn't have that before." They sat in silence for a while, the unspoken bond between them stronger than words. The breaking point of the crisis was near. Both of them knew it. But whatever came next, they also knew something else. Neither of them would face it alone. Together, they had crossed a line where duty ended and true companionship began. And though the storm outside still raged, inside the quiet of their nights, they had found a fragile strength that no council could break. The embassy was quieter now, though not entirely calm. The diplomatic crisis that had once hung like a storm cloud over Solari's mission had begun to ease. Through patient negotiation, careful compromise, and the subtle steadiness of her presence, she had begun to regain trust among the delegations. Yet for both Solari and Daniel, the nights remained the truest measure of the work they had done together. It was a clear night when Daniel returned to her quarters, the city below shimmering with distant lights. He had grown used to this routine, the long walk from the gate, the familiar hum of the hallways, the quiet anticipation of entering her chamber. Every night was different, yet every night held the same unspoken understanding. Solari greeted him with a nod, but this time there was warmth in her expression. "You are punctual," she said softly. Daniel shrugged. "I told you I wouldn't leave." Her lips curved slightly, the faintest hint of a smile, and for a moment, the tension that had long hung between them seemed to dissolve. That night, the resting chamber felt different. It was no longer the place of struggle, the site of broken sleep and whispered worries. Now it carried a quiet comfort, a safe haven from the pressures of duty. Solari lay on the couch, her braid loose over her shoulder, her posture relaxed. Daniel sat beside her, steady, attentive, but no longer tense with the fear of failing her. Their nights had become something more than obligation. They had become ritual, connection, companionship. You know, Solari said quietly, I did not expect to feel this, not with a human. Daniel glanced at her. This? Trust. Comfort. The knowledge that another being is here, not for obligation, not for duty, but simply because you choose to be. Daniel hesitated. I didn't realize I could make such a difference. She turned her gaze to him. You already have. You are no longer just my companion for sleep. You are a presence I rely on that is rare for my kind and even rarer with humans. Daniel's heart tightened. He had known their bond had grown, but hearing it aloud made the reality undeniable. Weeks passed. The crisis faded from council chambers and diplomatic halls, but their nights continued. Each evening, Daniel would arrive, and each night they shared the quiet ritual of presence. Words were sometimes exchanged, sometimes not. Music, stories, and laughter now intertwined with silence and rest. Solari had begun to share her dreams more freely, and Daniel sometimes shared his own. He told her of his childhood hopes, the small adventures he had imagined but never pursued, the moments of loneliness he had learned to bear. She listened with patience, her silver eyes reflecting the light of lamps and the faint glow of her hair threads. In turn, Solari spoke of her people, of customs and festivals he could barely imagine, of hopes for her world and her family left behind. Through these stories, Daniel learned more than any book could teach. He began to understand not just her duty, but her heart, her fears, and her quiet courage. One night, Daniel noticed something unusual. Solari's breathing was deep even, but her expression held a softness he had never seen before, an almost childlike calm, unguarded and serene. You seem different tonight, he said softly. She looked at him, eyes wide and reflective. I feel complete, not because the crisis ended, not because I fulfilled my duty, but because I am not alone. You have become more than a presence. You are part of my nights, part of my thoughts, part of the courage I carry into my day. Daniel felt warmth rise in his chest. You've become part of mine too. Solari inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the truth of his words. No other human had ever spent such intimate, quiet hours with her. No other being had offered steady companionship simply for the sake of being there. As time passed, they developed their own quiet ways of supporting each other. Solari would sometimes hum the soft songs of her people, a melody Daniel learned to anticipate and hum along with. Daniel shared small earth songs, simple and imperfect, and Solari would smile, a rare gesture of openness. They learned to read each other without words. A shift in posture, a change in breathing, a glance. It was enough to understand if the other needed comfort, silence, or simple presence. Nights that had once been tense or restless now became spaces of mutual trust and warmth. One evening, Solari spoke of a personal memory she had never shared with anyone else. On Arasheni, my family would rest together in large halls. I was a child then. I would lie beside my sister and hear her soft breathing, feel her warmth. The nights were never lonely, but when I left for this mission, I never expected the nights to feel so empty. Daniel listened quietly, letting her words flow. I think I understand. I've spent many nights alone too, even surrounded by people. There's a difference between being in a room with someone and truly feeling their presence. She nodded, her eyes reflecting quiet appreciation. And you have given me that presence. You have reminded me that solitude does not have to be loneliness. Daniel swallowed. And you've reminded me that even someone far from home can still find connection. The final weeks of Solari's mission approached. Daniel felt the weight of the thought that their nights together might soon end. He had grown to cherish the routine, the trust, and the subtle, wordless bond they shared. Solari seemed to sense his unease. One night, as they settled into their usual places, she spoke softly. Daniel, when my mission ends, our nights may change. I may return to Arishen, and you may return to your life. But know this. What we have shared here is not defined by time or distance. It is a bond that neither duty nor distance can undo. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. I know, and I hope that even then we can carry it with us. Not as an obligation, but as a choice. She inclined her head slowly. Yes, a choice. One I would make again. The night before her final departure, they sat together longer than usual. The lamps cast soft shadows across the chamber. They spoke less, letting the silence speak for them, letting the comfort of shared presence say what words could not. Daniel hummed softly, the familiar melody wrapping around them. Silari closed her eyes, her breathing even and calm, resting fully at last. When dawn came, they did not rush. The moment stretched, filled with quiet acknowledgement of everything they had shared. "You have changed my nights, Daniel," Silari said quietly, "and my days too, though I did not realize it until now." "You've changed mine," he replied. "More than I could have imagined." She smiled, the first full smile he had seen in weeks. "Then let this be our final night together as companions, but not as strangers." "We are more than that now." Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of her words. They were no longer simply diplomat and human assigned to duty. They were companions in the truest sense, two beings who had faced nights of uncertainty, fear, and loneliness, and had emerged stronger for having each other. As Silari prepared to depart, Daniel helped her gather her things. They walked through the halls together one last time. The embassy was alive with activity, but the world seemed smaller, warmer somehow. Before she stepped into the transport chamber, she turned to him. "Daniel Hayes, thank you for every night, every story, every song, for being present, steady, and patient. I will carry this always." Daniel felt the lump in his throat again. "And I'll carry it too. You're not just someone I helped sleep. You're someone I'll never forget." She inclined her head, then stepped into the transport chamber. The doors closed slowly, and the soft hum of the transport activated. Within moments, she was gone. Daniel returned to his quarters that night, feeling the absence of her presence like a quiet echo. But he also felt something else, a sense of fulfillment, a warmth that did not fade. The bond they had built was beyond duty, beyond obligation. It was a bond born of trust, care, and shared vulnerability. Even across worlds, across the stretch of space, they had created something rare and precious. And as he lay in his own bed that night, he realized he had learned something fundamental. Sometimes, the simplest acts of presence, staying, listening, humming, sharing silence, can carry more meaning than the grandest gestures of power or diplomacy. Silari's mission had ended, but their companionship endured. And Daniel knew that no matter where life took them, the nights they had shared would remain a light, guiding them both through the quiet hours of the world. The sleep that had begun as duty had grown into trust. The trust had blossomed into friendship, and the friendship had proven that even across stars and worlds, connection could be forged, stronger than distance, deeper than fear, and lasting far beyond the boundaries of obligation.